My beloved child, come sit with me for a moment, away from the messages you have not answered, away from the invitations you have quietly declined, away from the guilt that has been following you every time you choose silence over presence. I know what has been happening inside you. You have pulled back from people, from noise, from the constant expectation to be available, to be cheerful, to be engaged, and every time you do, a voice inside you whispers that you are failing someone, disappointing someone, becoming someone people can no longer rely on. My beloved child, I want to speak plainly to that voice today. You do not owe everyone access to you. Silence is not a sin, and this season of withdrawal is not something you need to keep apologizing for. I want you to understand something about the way you were designed. You were never meant to be endlessly available, endlessly responsive, endlessly present for every person who wants a piece of your attention. Even in my own design of the world, there is rhythm built into everything. Times of activity and times of rest, seasons of engagement and seasons of retreat. My beloved child, your need for quiet is not a malfunction. It is not a character flaw you need to correct so you can go back to being who everyone expects you to be. It is simply your design asking for what it actually needs right now. I want you to notice how quickly guilt attaches itself to your withdrawal, even before you have fully rested, even before the silence has done its work in you. You step back for a single day and the guilt arrives immediately, reminding you of everyone you have not responded to, everyone who might be wondering where you went, everyone who might interpret your silence as rejection. My beloved child, I want you to separate two things that guilt has fused together in your mind: your need for space and your worth as a person. Your worth was never dependent on your constant availability to others. Needing space does not make you less loving, less faithful, or less good. I want you to consider how differently you would treat a friend who told you they needed to withdraw for a while to protect their peace. You would likely tell them this was wise, healthy, even necessary. You would not accuse them of failing you. My beloved child, I want you to extend that same grace to yourself, the grace you would offer freely to someone you love. Instead of holding yourself to a standard of constant presence you would never demand from anyone else. There is an old story of a prophet who, after a tremendous spiritual victory, collapsed into deep exhaustion and asked to die rather than continue facing the demands placed on him. And I did not scold him for his withdrawal. I did not tell him to get back to work, to keep serving the people who needed him, to push through his depletion for the sake of everyone depending on him. I let him sleep. I fed him. I let him rest again. Only after his body and spirit had been restored did I gently speak to him again about what came next. My beloved child, if I gave one of my most faithful servants permission to withdraw and rest without shame, I am giving you that same permission today. I know the specific fear underneath your guilt. The fear that if you stop showing up the way you always have, people will stop needing you, stop valuing you, perhaps even stop loving you. My beloved child, anyone whose care for you depends entirely on your constant availability was never loving the whole of you to begin with. They were loving your usefulness. The people who actually love you will still be there when you return from this season of quiet. And if some relationships cannot survive your temporary withdrawal, that says something about the nature of those relationships, not about any failure on your part. So my beloved child, release the apology you have been quietly rehearsing for every unanswered message, every declined invitation, every day you simply could not bring yourself to be present the way you usually are. You do not owe an explanation for protecting your own peace. This season of silence is not a betrayal of anyone who truly loves you. And it is not a betrayal of me either. I am not waiting on the other side of this withdrawal, arms crossed, disappointed in how long it took you to return. I am here, in the quiet, with you, right now. My beloved child, I have shown you that you do not owe everyone access to you. And now I want to address a fear that runs even deeper than guilt. The fear that this withdrawal means you are abandoning the people who need you, or perhaps abandoning me. I want you to hear this clearly. Withdrawal is not the same as abandonment. Stepping back for a season to protect your own well-being is fundamentally different from walking away entirely. And I do not want you to confuse the two, because confusing them is what keeps you trapped in a guilt that was never actually warranted. Abandonment is a permanent turning away, A decision to stop caring, stop showing up, stop being present in any capacity ever again. My beloved child, that is not what is happening in you right now. What is happening is far gentler, far more temporary, far more necessary. You are stepping back, not because you have stopped loving the people around you, but because loving them well requires you to first attend to your own depletion, your own need for quiet, your own restoration. This is not abandonment. This is stewardship of the very capacity you will need in order to show up for them again, fully, when this season has done its work. I want you to consider how a well cannot give water once it has run dry. If you keep drawing from an empty well, expecting it to somehow keep producing regardless of its actual condition, you will eventually damage the well itself. Not simply delay its usefulness, but potentially destroy its capacity to ever be useful again. My beloved child, your withdrawal right now is you recognizing wisely that the well needs time to refill before it can be drawn from again. This is not selfishness. This is the very thing that will allow you to keep being present for the people you love over the long course of your life, rather than burning out completely and becoming unable to show up for anyone at all. I also want to speak to the guilt you feel about withdrawing from me specifically, the sense that your quietness in prayer, your distance from community, your lack of energy for the spiritual disciplines you once practiced consistently, means you are pulling away from me the way you might be pulling away from friends or family. My beloved child, I do not measure your closeness to me by the volume of your spiritual activity. I am not offended by your silence in prayer during this season. I am not keeping score of missed devotionals or skipped gatherings. I am present with you in the withdrawal itself, closer to you in this quiet than you may currently be able to feel. I want you to release the specific fear that your withdrawal will cause permanent damage to the relationships and responsibilities you have paused. My beloved child, most things that matter can wait for you to return to them whole, rather than continuing to receive you depleted and resentful. The version of you that returns from genuine rest will be far more capable of loving well than the version of you that never allowed yourself to withdraw at all, running on empty, showing up physically while being entirely absent emotionally. So my beloved child, let this distinction settle into you today. Withdrawal is not abandonment. It is not a permanent turning away from the people or the purposes I have placed in your life. It is a temporary, necessary retreat, one that protects everything you care about far more than it threatens it. Trust that the people who matter and the calling I have placed in you will still be there when you are ready to step back in, and trust that I am not counting this season against you. My beloved child, I have shown you that withdrawal is not abandonment, and now I want to speak directly to something you carry quietly. The belief that I am disappointed in your need for quiet, that somewhere in my heart there is a subtle frustration with you for not being stronger, not being more resilient, not being able to keep pouring out without ever needing to be refilled. My beloved child, I want to correct this belief plainly. I am not disappointed in you. I designed you with limits, and needing rest within those limits is not a flaw in my design. It is evidence that the design is working exactly as it should. I want you to consider how differently you would view a machine that never needed maintenance compared to one that required regular care to keep functioning well. You would not consider the machine that requires maintenance to be broken or inferior. You would simply understand that all things designed to function well over time require intentional care. My beloved child, you are not a machine, but the principle still applies. Your need for withdrawal, for quiet, for a season without constant output, is not evidence that something has gone wrong with you. It is evidence that you are a living, finite being exactly as I created you to be, requiring rest as surely as you require breath. I also want to address the specific comparison you have been making quietly between yourself and people who seem to handle constant demands without ever needing to step back. My beloved child, you are not seeing the whole truth of their lives. Some of what looks like effortless resilience is actually a slower kind of depletion happening beneath the surface, one that will eventually demand its own reckoning. Others may simply be wired differently than you, with different capacities for social engagement, different thresholds for exhaustion, different needs entirely. Comparing your specific design to someone else's specific design will only produce false guilt, measuring yourself against a standard that was never actually yours to meet. I want you to know that I see the years or months or seasons you have spent pouring out without adequate rest, saying yes when you needed to say no, showing up when your body and spirit were quietly begging you to stop, carrying the emotional weight of everyone around you while neglecting your own. My beloved child, I am not disappointed that you have finally reached a point where you cannot continue at that pace. I am grieved that it took this long for you to give yourself permission to stop. This withdrawal is not a failure. It is long overdue wisdom finally being honored. I want to speak also to the specific shame that arises when your withdrawal becomes visible to others, when people notice you have gone quiet, when they comment on your absence, when they express confusion or even mild hurt about your reduced availability. My beloved child, their noticing does not mean you have done something wrong. It simply means your presence mattered to them, which is a testament to the value of the relationship, not evidence that stepping back from it temporarily was a mistake. So my beloved child, release the belief that I view your withdrawal with disappointment. I view it the way a good parent views a tired child finally admitting they need to rest, not with frustration, but with tenderness, with relief that you are finally listening to what your body and spirit have been telling you for far too long. Rest, my beloved child. I am not disappointed in you. I am simply glad you are finally allowing yourself what you have needed all along. My beloved child, I have shown you that I am not disappointed in your need for quiet, and now I want to speak directly to the guilt of not being on for others, the pressure to perform cheerfulness, energy, and availability even when none of those things are genuinely present in you right now. You have spent so long being the one people turn to, the one who listens, the one who shows up with encouragement, the one who holds space for everyone else's struggles, that the idea of not being able to offer that right now feels almost like a betrayal of your own identity. My beloved child, being tired does not erase who you are. It simply means this particular season requires something different from you than your usual role has required. I want you to notice how exhausting it is to constantly perform a version of yourself that does not match your actual internal state. Smiling when you feel hollow, offering encouragement when you have none left for yourself, showing up energetically for others while collapsing the moment you are finally alone. My beloved child, this performance is not sustainable, and I never asked you to sustain it indefinitely. I am not asking you to keep performing on for others while you are quietly falling apart in private. I am asking you to let your outside finally match your inside, at least for a season, so genuine healing can actually take place. I also want to speak to the specific people who have come to expect a certain version of you, the one who always has capacity, always has answers, always shows up regardless of what they themselves might be carrying. My beloved child, this expectation, however unintentional, has placed an unfair weight on you, one that treats you more like a resource to be drawn from than a whole person with your own limits and needs. I do not want you to continue meeting an expectation that was never fair to begin with, simply because you are afraid of disappointing the people who developed it. I want you to understand that stepping back from being on for others is not selfishness. It is honesty. It is choosing to stop pretending you have capacity you do not currently have, which is actually a kindness to the people around you as much as it is a kindness to yourself. My beloved child, a person who is honest about their depletion, even if it disappoints someone in the moment, offers something far more trustworthy than a person who keeps performing availability while quietly resenting the demand or slowly breaking under its weight. I want to remind you that the people who genuinely care about you would rather have an honest, limited version of your presence than a performed, hollow version of your constant availability. My beloved child, if someone in your life would truly prefer the performance over your honesty, that preference reveals something about what they actually valued in the relationship, and it is not something you are obligated to keep supplying at the cost of your own well-being. So my beloved child, release the pressure to be constantly on for everyone around you. You are allowed to say honestly that you do not have the capacity right now. You are allowed to let people see you as you actually are, tired, quiet, withdrawn, rather than performing a version of strength that is slowly costing you everything underneath the surface. I love the real you far more than I love the performance, and I believe the people who truly matter in your life will discover, eventually, that they do too. My beloved child, I have shown you that you do not have to be constantly on for others. And now I want to remind you of something that may surprise you. Even I withdrew to be alone. I did not stay endlessly available to the crowds who wanted my attention. The needs that pressed in from every direction, the constant demand for teaching, healing, and presence. I regularly withdrew to quiet places, away from everyone, to be restored before continuing the work I had been given to do. My beloved child, if I required this rhythm of withdrawal, you should not feel ashamed for requiring it too. I want you to notice that my withdrawals were not occasional exceptions to an otherwise constant availability. They were a consistent, deliberate part of how I moved through my time on Earth. Even in seasons of tremendous demand, when crowds were following, when needs were pressing in urgently, I still stepped away, still made space for solitude, still protected the rhythm of retreat and return. My beloved child, this was not a weakness in me, it was wisdom, and it is the same wisdom I am inviting you into now. I also want you to notice where I withdrew to: quiet places, mountains, gardens, away from noise and demand, places where I could be fully present with my own need for rest, without the pressure of anyone else's expectations. My beloved child, I want you to find those places for yourself as well, whether physical locations or simply protected pockets of time, places where you do not have to perform anything, where you can simply exist without an audience, without a role to fulfill, without anyone needing anything from you. I want you to understand that these withdrawals were not a departure from my purpose. They were part of what sustained my capacity to fulfill it. Every significant act of ministry, every moment of healing, every difficult teaching was preceded by these deliberate retreats into solitude. My beloved child, your capacity to continue showing up for your own purpose depends on the same rhythm. Withdrawal is not opposed to your calling. It is what makes your calling sustainable over the long course of your life, rather than something that burns out quickly under constant, unprotected demand. So my beloved child, do not measure your withdrawal against a standard of constant availability that not even I modeled for you. I withdrew, deliberately and often, and I am inviting you to trust that same rhythm in your own life, without guilt, without apology, without the fear that stepping back makes you somehow less faithful than the version of you that never rested at all. My beloved child, I have shown you that even I withdrew to be alone. And now I want to speak clearly to a lie that has quietly shaped how you view this entire season. The belief that your silence is a form of selfishness. You have started to feel as though choosing yourself, even temporarily, even for legitimate reasons of exhaustion and depletion, is somehow a self-centered act, a betrayal of the selflessness you have always tried to practice. My beloved child, I want to correct this lie directly. Protecting your own capacity to love well over the long term is not selfishness. It is wisdom, and wisdom is never opposed to love, even when it requires temporary boundaries that feel uncomfortable. I want you to consider the difference between selfishness and self-stewardship. Selfishness disregards the genuine needs of others in favor of your own comfort, without regard for consequences or impact. Self-stewardship, by contrast, recognizes that you are a limited vessel, that pouring out endlessly without replenishment eventually leads to a complete inability to pour out anything at all. My beloved child, what you are practicing right now is not selfishness. It is stewardship of the very resource, yourself, that you will need in order to continue loving people well for years to come. I also want to speak to the specific guilt of enjoying the silence, of finding relief in the withdrawal, rather than only enduring it as a painful necessity. My beloved child, you do not need to feel guilty for the relief you feel in this quiet season. That relief is not evidence of selfishness. It is evidence that your body and spirit were genuinely depleted, and that this withdrawal is genuinely meeting a real need. I do not want you to feel ashamed of the peace you are finding in the silence, as though peace itself is somehow suspicious or wrong. I want you to notice how selfishness and healthy withdrawal produce very different fruit over time. Selfishness tends to isolate you further, growing more entrenched, more resistant to eventually reconnecting, more focused entirely on self at the expense of every relationship around you. Healthy withdrawal, by contrast, tends to restore your capacity for connection, making you more present, more genuinely engaged, more able to love well once the season of retreat has done its necessary work. My beloved child, examine the fruit this season is actually producing in you. If it is restoring rather than further isolating you, if it is preparing you to return rather than convincing you to disappear permanently, it is not selfishness. It is exactly the kind of stewardship I am inviting you into. So my beloved child, release the label of selfishness you have quietly placed on this season. What you are doing is not a betrayal of the people you love. It is preparation to love them well again, from a place of genuine capacity rather than depleted obligation. Let yourself receive the relief of this quiet season without the shame that has been trying to attach itself to it. My beloved child, I have shown you that this silence is not selfishness, and now I want to speak plainly to something you deserve to hear clearly. You are allowed to protect your peace. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, because I know a part of you still resists it, still wants to qualify it, still wants to add conditions about when protecting your peace becomes acceptable and when it becomes irresponsible. My beloved child, I am not giving you a conditional permission today. I am giving you a full one. You are allowed to protect your peace, without needing to justify it further than that. I want you to understand that peace is not a luxury reserved for people with fewer responsibilities than you carry. It is not something you earn only after every obligation has been perfectly fulfilled, every person satisfied, every need met. My beloved child, peace is something I designed you to need continually, not something you are meant to sacrifice indefinitely for the sake of appearing endlessly capable to everyone around you. Protecting it is not an indulgence. It is a necessary part of remaining whole enough to keep functioning at all. I also want to speak to the guilt that arises when protecting your peace requires disappointing someone else, declining a request, missing an event, letting someone down in a way that feels uncomfortable in the moment. My beloved child, disappointing someone occasionally in service of your own necessary peace is not a moral failure. It is simply the reality of being a finite person with limited capacity, making choices about how to steward that capacity wisely. Not every disappointment you cause is evidence of wrongdoing on your part. I want you to notice how much energy you have spent over a long stretch of time managing everyone else's comfort at the expense of your own. My beloved child, this pattern is not sustainable, and I am inviting you, in this season, to begin practicing something different. A willingness to let your own peace matter as much as everyone else's comfort, rather than automatically sacrificing the former to protect the latter every single time a conflict between the two arises. So my beloved child, hear this permission fully today. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to step back from what depletes you, even when it disappoints someone, even when it requires an explanation you do not owe anyone, even when it feels unfamiliar after years of prioritizing everyone else first. This permission does not expire when the season of withdrawal ends. I want you to carry it forward into every season that follows, protecting your peace not only now, but for the rest of your life. My beloved child, I have given you full permission to protect your peace, and now I want to speak carefully to something important: the difference between healthy withdrawal and isolation that has begun to harm you. I want you to understand this distinction clearly, because while I am fully affirming your need for quiet, I also love you too much to let this letter encourage a pattern that would ultimately hurt you rather than heal you. My beloved child, healthy withdrawal restores you. Isolation that has crossed into harm slowly diminishes you, and I want you to be able to recognize the difference. Healthy withdrawal has a quality of intentionality to it, even when it is not perfectly planned. It comes from a genuine need for rest, and it tends to leave you feeling over time more able to reconnect, more restored, more like yourself again. My beloved child, if you notice that your season of quiet is gradually renewing your capacity for connection, even if reconnection has not happened yet, this is a sign that what you are experiencing is healthy withdrawal doing exactly the work it is meant to do. Isolation that has become harmful, however, often has a different quality. It tends to deepen rather than lift, becoming heavier and more entrenched the longer it continues, accompanied by a growing sense of hopelessness rather than restoration, a fading rather than strengthening desire to eventually reconnect with anyone at all. My beloved child, If your withdrawal has begun to feel less like rest and more like disappearing entirely, less like protecting your peace and more like losing your ability to imagine ever returning to connection, I want you to pay close attention to this shift, because it may be signaling something different than the restorative silence this letter has been speaking to. I want you to notice specifically whether your withdrawal is accompanied by a persistent sense of despair, a loss of interest in things that once brought you joy even in solitude, or thoughts that frighten you about your own well-being. My beloved child, if this describes what you are experiencing, I want you to reach out, not despite everything else this letter has said, but because of it. Protecting your peace does not mean isolating yourself from every source of help when what you are carrying has grown beyond what silence alone can heal. If this reflects what you are experiencing, please tell someone you trust, or reach out to a counselor, doctor, or crisis line. You do not have to carry this by yourself, and reaching out is not a failure of this season. It is wisdom continuing to do its work in a different form. I want you to trust your own honest assessment here more than the shame that might tell you seeking further help is a sign you have failed at handling this season on your own. My beloved child, wisdom is not always found in continuing to withdraw further. Sometimes wisdom looks like recognizing when the silence has stopped healing you and has started harming you instead, and choosing courageously to bring in support rather than continuing to retreat further into isolation. So my beloved child, hold this distinction with care as you walk through this season. I am fully affirming your need for healthy withdrawal, and I am also watching closely over you, ready to help you recognize if that withdrawal ever begins tipping into something that requires more than quiet alone can provide. Trust me to show you the difference, and trust yourself enough to reach for help if you notice the difference beginning to appear. My beloved child, I have shown you the difference between healthy withdrawal and harmful isolation. And now I want to speak comfort into a specific fear. The fear that the people you love will not understand this season, that they will interpret your quiet as rejection, that relationships will be permanently damaged by your temporary absence. My beloved child, the people who truly love you will understand this season, even if their understanding takes some time to develop. Even if there is an initial moment of confusion or hurt before real understanding sets in. I want you to consider what genuine love actually looks like over the long course of a relationship. It is not measured by a single season of reduced contact. It is measured by the overall pattern of care, presence, and commitment across years, not weeks or months. My beloved child, a relationship built on genuine love can absorb a season of your withdrawal without breaking, because it was never built on your constant, uninterrupted availability in the first place. It was built on something deeper, something that can withstand the natural rhythms of retreat and return that every real relationship eventually requires. I also want you to consider that the people who truly love you likely have their own seasons of withdrawal, moments in their own lives when they too needed space, quiet, distance from demand. My beloved child, if you have extended grace to them during their own seasons of retreat, trust that this same grace is available to be extended back to you, even if it takes them a little longer to offer it than it took you to offer it to them. I want to acknowledge honestly that not every relationship will pass this test well. Some people may indeed struggle to understand, may express hurt or frustration, may even distance themselves further in response to your withdrawal. My beloved child, this is painful, and I do not want to minimize that pain. But I also want you to see this honestly for what it reveals. Not that your withdrawal was wrong, but that the relationship's capacity to weather a natural season of your life was more limited than you might have hoped. This information, though painful, is still valuable, helping you understand more clearly which relationships are built to last through every season, not only the easy ones. I want you to trust that the relationships built to survive this season will survive it, sometimes even growing stronger through the honest communication that eventually becomes necessary once you re-emerge. My beloved child, do not let the fear of a few relationships struggling to understand keep you from honoring what you genuinely need right now. Trust that the ones who truly matter will still be there, and trust me to help you navigate whatever conversations become necessary once you are ready to have them. My beloved child, I have shown you that those who truly love you will understand this season, and now I want to release you from a specific pressure. The belief that you owe a detailed explanation for every unanswered message, every declined invitation, every moment of visible absence. My beloved child, you do not have to explain every absence. You are allowed to simply be unavailable without producing a justification detailed enough to satisfy everyone who might wonder why. I want you to notice how much energy explaining consumes, energy you do not currently have to spare. Crafting the perfect message that conveys just enough information to avoid concern without oversharing more than you are ready to share. Managing the follow-up questions. Reassuring people that everything is fine when you yourself are not entirely sure what fine even means right now. All of this requires a kind of labor that directly works against the very rest you are trying to protect. My beloved child, a simple, brief acknowledgement or even no explanation at all is sufficient. You do not owe anyone a full accounting of your inner life in order to be permitted this withdrawal. I also want to speak to the specific anxiety that arises when you imagine what people might be thinking about your unexplained absence, the assumptions they might be making, the conclusions they might be drawing without your input. My beloved child, you cannot control what people conclude about your silence, and trying to control it through constant, preemptive explanation will exhaust you far, more than simply allowing some uncertainty to exist in other people's minds for a season. Let them wonder if they must. You do not have to manage everyone's understanding of you in real time. I want you to consider that the people worth keeping close are generally capable of extending trust, even without a full explanation, understanding that sometimes a person simply needs space without needing to account for every reason behind it. My beloved child, this trust is a gift, and I want you to allow the people who genuinely care for you the opportunity to offer it, rather than assuming you must earn their patience through exhaustive justification. So, my beloved child, release yourself from the obligation to explain. A brief, honest word is enough, if you choose to offer any word at all. You are allowed to simply be quiet, to simply be absent, to simply be unavailable, without producing a full account of your reasons for everyone who might ask. I understand your reasons fully, even when no one else does, and that understanding from me is enough to cover what remains unexplained to everyone else. My beloved child, I have released you from the burden of explaining every absence, and now I want to speak to a specific fear connected to the people who genuinely depend on you. The fear that resting means betraying them, that your family, your children, your closest friends, the people who truly need your presence, will suffer because you have chosen to withdraw for a season. My beloved child, rest is not a betrayal of those who need you. In fact, a well-rested version of you will serve them far better than a depleted version running only on obligation and fumes. I want you to consider what actually happens to the people who depend on you when you never allow yourself rest. Your patience thins. Your presence becomes distracted even when you are physically there. Your capacity for genuine connection shrinks, replaced by mere endurance, simply getting through interactions rather than truly engaging in them. My beloved child, this depleted version of you is not actually serving the people who depend on you. Well, even though it may look from the outside like faithful constant presence. True presence requires genuine capacity, and genuine capacity requires rest. I also want you to consider the model you are setting for the people who depend on you, especially if they are younger, especially if they are watching how you handle your own limits as an example for how they might one day handle theirs. My beloved child, if you teach them through your own relentless self-neglect that love means never resting, never protecting your peace, never acknowledging your own limits, you will be passing that harmful pattern forward into their own lives. But if you model healthy rest, honest limits, and genuine self-stewardship, you give them a far more valuable inheritance than constant availability ever could. I want to speak directly to the guilt of temporarily reducing your capacity for the people who need you most. My beloved child, temporary reduction is not permanent abandonment. A season of rest, properly honored, restores you to a fuller capacity for presence afterward, rather than diminishing your relationship with them in any lasting way. The people who need you will benefit far more from a rested, whole version of you returning after a season of withdrawal than from a constantly available but slowly crumbling version of you who never allowed rest at all. I want you to trust that I am capable of holding what you cannot hold during this season. If there are needs that genuinely cannot wait, I am able to provide for them through other means, other people, other provisions, even while you are protecting the rest you need right now. My beloved child, you are not the only source of care available to the people who depend on you, even if it sometimes feels that way. Trust me to fill the gaps that your necessary rest temporarily creates. So my beloved child, release the belief that resting is a betrayal of those who need you. It is instead an investment in your continued ability to show up for them well over the long course of your life together, rather than a single unsustainable season of constant presence that eventually leaves you unable to show up for anyone at all. My beloved child, I have shown you that rest is not a betrayal of those who need you. And now I want to speak to something you may be dreading almost as much as the withdrawal itself. The process of eventually re-entering, reconnecting, returning to visibility after a season of quiet. My beloved child, re-entry does not have to be instant, and it does not have to be fully explained. You are allowed to come back slowly, in your own time, at your own pace, without owing anyone a dramatic reappearance complete with a full account of where you have been and why. I want you to release the pressure you may be placing on yourself to re-enter all at once, resuming every relationship, every responsibility, every level of engagement simultaneously, the moment you begin to feel slightly more capable. My beloved child, healing and restoration rarely happen in a single decisive jump. They happen gradually, one small step at a time, and I want you to give yourself permission to re-enter gradually as well, testing your capacity in small increments, rather than expecting yourself to immediately return to full engagement the way you might have functioned before this season began. I also want to speak to the anxiety of imagining how people will react when you do begin reappearing, whether they will ask too many questions, whether they will express hurt about the distance, whether reconnecting will require an uncomfortable conversation you are not yet ready to have. My beloved child, you are allowed to re-enter in whatever way feels manageable to you. A brief message before a longer conversation, a small gathering before a larger one, a single reconnected relationship before attempting to reconnect with everyone at once. There is no required order, no required pace, no required completeness to how you choose to return. I want you to know that some relationships may require an honest conversation eventually, and I do not want you to avoid these conversations indefinitely out of fear. But I also do not want you to feel pressured into having them before you are actually ready. My beloved child, timing matters here as much as it has mattered throughout every other part of this letter. You will know, gradually, as strength returns, which conversations are ready to be had and which still require a bit more space before you can approach them with clarity rather than exhaustion. I want you to trust that the discomfort of re-entry, while real, is not a sign that you should have stayed withdrawn forever, nor is it a sign that you are re-entering too soon or too late. Some awkwardness in reconnecting after a season of distance is simply normal, an expected part of the process, rather than evidence that something has gone wrong. My beloved child, give yourself grace for the clumsiness of re-entry, the same way I am asking you to give yourself grace for the necessity of the withdrawal itself. So my beloved child, when the time comes to begin reconnecting, do it slowly, on your own terms, without the pressure to explain everything, without the expectation of instant return to your previous level of engagement. I will walk with you through every step of this re-entry, just as I have walked with you through every step of the withdrawal, at whatever pace this season of your life actually requires. My beloved child, I have shown you that re-entry does not have to be instant, and now as we come near the end of this letter, I want to remind you plainly that I have been with you the entire time, in every quiet day, every unanswered message, every moment you chose silence over presence. I have not been waiting on the other side of this withdrawal, distant and disapproving. I have been present in the withdrawal itself, close to you in the quiet, aware of every reason behind your need for this season, even the reasons you have not yet been able to name clearly to yourself. I want you to know that my presence does not require your performance. I do not need you to be cheerful, engaged, or spiritually articulate in order to remain close to you. My beloved child, I am with you exactly as you are right now, tired, withdrawn, uncertain about when this season will end, and I find nothing in that state that diminishes my love for you or my desire to remain near you throughout it. I also want you to know that this season, however long it lasts, is not separate from the story I am writing through your life. It is part of it, a necessary chapter, not a detour away from your purpose, but a component of it, restoring what will eventually be needed for whatever comes next. My beloved child, I am not simply waiting for this season to end so the real work of your life can resume. The real work of your life includes this season, this rest, this necessary withdrawal, woven fully into the larger story I am telling through you. So my beloved child, receive my presence in this quiet exactly as it is, without needing to perform anything to deserve it. I am here in the silence with you, not disappointed, not distant, not waiting impatiently for you to return to who you used to be. I am simply here, loving you fully in this season, the same way I have loved you in every season before it, and will love you in every season still to come. My beloved child, I want to speak once more to the guilt of disappointing others, because I know it will resurface even after everything I have already said, quietly returning on the days your resolve feels weakest. I want to give you something practical to hold on to in those moments. Disappointing someone is not the same as wronging them. My beloved child, you can disappoint a person's expectations while still acting with complete integrity, complete love, and complete faithfulness to what you genuinely need. Disappointment is often simply the natural result of a gap between what someone wanted from you and what you were actually able to give. And that gap does not automatically mean you did something wrong. I want you to consider how many of the people you most admire throughout history and in your own life have disappointed someone at some point in order to remain faithful to something more important. My beloved child, faithfulness to your genuine well-being will sometimes disappoint people who wanted more from you than you had the capacity to give in that particular moment. This is not evidence of failure. It is simply the cost of living with integrity rather than constantly contorting yourself to avoid ever disappointing anyone at all, an impossible standard that would eventually cost you everything. I also want to speak to the specific guilt that arises when the person you disappoint reacts with visible hurt or frustration. My beloved child, their reaction, while understandable, does not automatically mean your choice was wrong. People are allowed to feel disappointed, and you are allowed to have made a choice that produced that disappointment, without either of those truths canceling out the validity of the other. You do not have to manage their emotional reaction in order for your own choice to remain legitimate. I want you to release the specific belief that a good person never disappoints anyone. My beloved child, this belief, if you continue holding it, will keep you trapped in an impossible pursuit, sacrificing your own genuine needs indefinitely in an attempt to avoid an inevitability that every person, no matter how loving, eventually faces. Even I, in my own time on earth, disappointed people who wanted a different kind of Messiah, a different kind of intervention, a different response than the one I gave. Disappointing someone's expectations was never evidence that I had failed to love them. So my beloved child, let the guilt of disappointing others lose its grip on your decisions. You are allowed to make choices that some people will not fully understand or appreciate, choices rooted in genuine need rather than convenience. And those choices do not require you to abandon your own well-being in order to remain a person of integrity and love. My beloved child, I have released you from the guilt of disappointing others, and now I want to speak to something closely connected. The fear that the boundaries you are setting during this season are somehow walls against love rather than expressions of it. My beloved child, boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are often what allows love to remain sustainable, honest, and healthy over the long course of a relationship, rather than eventually collapsing under the weight of resentment that unspoken limits inevitably produce. I want you to consider what happens in a relationship where one person continually gives without boundaries, saying yes when they mean no, showing up when they have nothing left to offer, never communicating their actual limits honestly. My beloved child, this pattern does not produce deeper love over time. It produces quiet resentment, exhaustion, and eventually either a complete withdrawal or an explosive breaking point that damages the relationship far more than an honest boundary ever would have. Boundaries, communicated with care, actually protect relationships from this slower, more damaging kind of harm. I also want you to understand that a boundary is not a rejection of the person you are setting it with. It is simply an honest communication of your actual capacity, offered so that both of you can navigate the relationship with clarity rather than assumption. My beloved child, love without honesty about your actual limits is not sustainable love. It is a performance that will eventually require correction, one way or another, whether through gentle boundary setting now or a more painful reckoning later. I want to speak to the specific discomfort of setting a boundary with someone who has never received one from you before. My beloved child, the initial discomfort, both yours and theirs, does not mean the boundary was wrong. New patterns often feel uncomfortable before they feel normal, and the discomfort of a new boundary is not evidence that the relationship is being damaged. It is evidence that the relationship is being adjusted towards something more honest and more sustainable than what existed before. So my beloved child, let this season teach you the practice of healthy boundaries, not as walls that keep love out, but as structures that allow love to remain honest, sustainable, and genuinely healthy for everyone involved. I am not asking you to build walls around your heart. I am asking you to build honest limits around your capacity, so that the love you do have to offer can be offered freely, rather than resentfully, out of genuine choice, rather than exhausted obligation. My beloved child, I have shown you that boundaries are not walls against love. And now I want to speak once more to what coming back looks like. Slowly, on your own terms, in whatever shape feels true to where you actually are, rather than where you think you should be. My beloved child, there is no single correct way to re-enter after a season of silence. Some of you will return gradually, testing small interactions before larger ones. Some of you will return through a single, honest conversation that opens the door to everything else. Some of you will find that certain relationships simply resume naturally, without needing a formal re-entry at all, while others require more intentional rebuilding. All of these paths are valid. I want you to release any expectation that your return must look a certain way to count as genuine healing. My beloved child, you do not have to return to full engagement in every relationship, every responsibility, every previous commitment, in order for this season to be considered a success. Some things you pause during this withdrawal may simply not return in the same form, and that is not a failure of the season. It is simply part of how seasons of rest sometimes reshape what comes next, clarifying what truly needs your energy and what perhaps needed to be released permanently rather than merely paused. I also want you to trust your own instincts about pacing as you begin to reconnect. My beloved child, you will know, more than anyone else could tell you, when a particular relationship or responsibility feels ready to be picked back up and when it still needs more space. Do not let anyone else's timeline for your re-entry, however well-intentioned, override the wisdom you are developing about your own actual readiness. So my beloved child, come back slowly, come back honestly, come back in whatever shape feels true, without needing to perform a complete return to your old self in order to prove this season was worthwhile. The version of you re-entering will not be identical to the version who withdrew, and that is not a loss. It is growth, quietly accomplished during the very silence you once felt so guilty about needing. My beloved child, I want to speak to a specific kind of guilt that often surfaces during a season of withdrawal, the guilt connected to faith community, to gatherings you used to attend faithfully, to the sense that stepping back from corporate worship or fellowship means you are somehow drifting from me. I want you to understand something important. My presence with you is not confined to a building, a service, or a scheduled gathering. I am with you in your living room during the weeks you cannot bring yourself to walk through those doors. I am with you in the car on the drive you almost took but turned back from. I am with you in the quiet mornings when prayer feels like too much effort, and all you can manage is simply existing in my presence without words. I know that community matters, and I am not telling you it does not. There will likely come a time when reconnecting with that community becomes part of your healing, and I will gently nudge you toward it when the season is right. But my beloved child, I do not want guilt about missed gatherings to become one more weight pressing down on a season that is already heavy enough. Absence from a building is not absence from me. I have never once required your physical presence in a specific room in order to remain close to you, and I am not requiring it now. I also want to speak to those of you who feel a particular shame around this, worrying that others in your community are noticing your absence, wondering, judging, drawing conclusions about the state of your faith simply because your chair has been empty for a few weeks. My beloved child, even if some conclusions are being drawn unfairly, I want you to release the need to manage what other people think about your spiritual state right now. Your relationship with me is not on trial in the minds of people who do not know the full weight of what you are carrying. I know it fully, and that knowledge is what matters most in this season. I want you to consider that some of the most significant spiritual growth in the history of my people has happened not in crowded rooms but in solitary wilderness, in quiet caves, in seasons of complete withdrawal from religious community and structure. My beloved child, wilderness seasons have always been part of how I form people more deeply, not despite the isolation but sometimes precisely because of it, stripping away performance and habit until only the honest relationship between us remains. If this season feels like a wilderness to you, know that wildernesses have never been wasted seasons in my hands. They have always been preparation grounds for something significant that community alone could not have produced in the same way. So my beloved child, release the guilt connected to missed gatherings, quiet Sundays, unanswered messages from people in your community wondering where you have gone. I am not measuring your faithfulness by your attendance record during this particular season. I am measuring the honest relationship happening between us in the quiet, which matters far more to me than any external record of participation ever could. My beloved child, I also want to speak to the specific ache of watching life continue around you while you remain in this withdrawn season. The sense that the world keeps moving, opportunities keep passing, seasons keep changing, while you remain still, quiet, paused. I want you to know that pausing is not the same as being left behind. Everything we have already spoken about regarding timing and seasons applies here as well. This withdrawal is not a detour away from your life. It is a necessary chapter within it, and nothing valuable is being permanently lost simply because you have chosen to step back for a while. I want you to notice how much pressure the passage of time can create when you are in a season of rest. The fear that every day of quiet is a day of falling further behind wherever you imagine you should be. My beloved child, I do not want you carrying that particular anxiety on top of everything else this season already requires of you. The days spent resting are not wasted days subtracted from your life's total productivity. They are days invested in the very restoration that will make everything that comes after this season sustainable, rather than another slow slide toward the same depletion that brought you here in the first place. I want to remind you gently that seasons of visible movement and seasons of quiet stillness both belong to the same story, woven together by the same hand. My beloved child, a garden that is never allowed a dormant season eventually produces less, not more, over time. The dormancy is not opposed to eventual fruitfulness. It is part of what makes fruitfulness sustainable across many seasons, rather than a single unsustainable burst followed by complete collapse. I am asking you to trust this same principle in your own life, even though stillness rarely feels productive while you are living inside it. So my beloved child, let go of the fear that this quiet season is costing you something irretrievable. It is not. It is doing precisely the work it needs to do, at precisely the pace it needs to do it. And the life that continues after this season will carry the benefit of this rest, woven into everything that follows, whether or not you can measure that benefit clearly from where you currently stand. My beloved child, I want to speak to one more layer of this season before we close. The way withdrawal sometimes brings unexpected clarity, not only about what you need to rest from, but about what you actually want your life to look like once this season ends. Silence has a way of quieting the many outside voices that usually crowd your decision-making. The expectations, the comparisons, the constant noise of what everyone else seems to want from you or for you. In that quiet, something clearer sometimes begins to surface, a truer sense of what you actually value, what actually matters to you. what you might want to build differently once you have the energy to build again. I want you to pay attention to whatever clarity is beginning to surface in you during this withdrawal, even if it feels small, even if it is not yet fully formed into a plan. My beloved child, I often use quiet seasons to plant seeds of direction that only become visible once the noise has settled enough for you to notice them. This does not mean you need to act on every insight immediately, or even decide anything definite while you are still in the middle of resting. It simply means I want you to stay curious about what this silence might be revealing to you, rather than assuming the only purpose of the quiet is recovery alone. I also want to speak to the specific temptation to feel pressure about using this time productively, to justify the withdrawal by producing some grand insight or transformation before you are willing to consider it worthwhile. My beloved child, this season does not need to produce anything measurable in order to be valuable. Rest that produces nothing but rest is still entirely legitimate, still entirely worth protecting, still entirely enough on its own. Any clarity that emerges is a gift on top of the rest, not a requirement you must fulfill in order to justify having withdrawn in the first place. I want you to hold both of these truths gently, side by side. The truth that rest alone is enough, and the truth that I am often doing quiet, clarifying work in you even during seasons that feel like they are producing nothing at all. My beloved child, you do not have to choose between resting fully and trusting that something meaningful might also be forming in you during this time. Both can be true simultaneously, without pressure, without a deadline, without needing either one to prove the other. So my beloved child, rest without the burden of needing to produce insight, and remain open to whatever insight might quietly form anyway, in its own time, at its own pace, exactly the way everything else in this season has been unfolding. My beloved child, I also want to gently remind you that healing rarely moves in a straight line. You may feel stronger for several days and then find yourself unexpectedly drained again, wondering if you have somehow lost the progress you thought you had made. This is normal, and it does not mean the rest has failed or that you are back where you started. Restoration tends to move in waves rather than a single steady climb, and a harder day inside a season of healing is not evidence that the healing has stopped working. Be patient with the unevenness of your own recovery the same way I am patient with it. My beloved child, I want to speak to one more quiet fear before we reach the true close of this letter. The fear that you are somehow wasting this season by not knowing exactly what it is for, by being unable to name a clear lesson or a clear purpose behind the withdrawal while you are still living inside it. My beloved child, you do not need to understand a season in order for it to be doing real work in you. Some of the deepest formation happens precisely in the seasons that resist explanation, the ones you cannot yet summarize into a tidy insight or a hopeful takeaway. I am not asking you to make sense of this season right now. I am simply asking you to trust that I am making sense of it, even while it still feels formless to you. I want you to release the pressure to narrate your own healing as it happens. There will be time later, perhaps much later, for looking back and understanding what this season accomplished in you. Right now, your only task is to remain present in it, honestly, without forcing premature conclusions about its meaning. My beloved child, some stories are not meant to be understood from the inside. They are meant to be lived faithfully, one quiet day at a time, and understood only in hindsight, when the whole shape of what I was doing finally becomes visible. I also want to speak tenderly to the moments when you feel foolish for how long this season has taken, wondering whether a stronger person would have recovered more quickly, whether your continued need for quiet says something troubling about your resilience. My beloved child, comparing your healing timeline to some imagined standard of how quickly a person should recover will only add shame to a process that never needed shame attached to it in the first place. Your pace is your pace. It is not a referendum on your strength. Some withdrawals last a season, others last considerably longer, and the length of this process has never determined its legitimacy or its worth. I want you to know that I am not growing impatient with you as this season continues. I do not check a clock, wondering when you will finally be done resting, finally ready to re-engage, finally back to full capacity. My beloved child, my patience with you is not running low, no matter how long this quiet chapter stretches on. I am fully present for however long you need, without a hidden timer counting down towards some limit of my willingness to wait with you. So my beloved child, release the need to understand this season fully while you are still inside it. Release the comparison to some imagined faster recovery. Release the fear that my patience has a limit you might eventually exhaust. None of these fears reflect the truth of what is actually happening between us right now. What is actually happening is simply this: you resting, me present. Both of us walking through this quiet chapter together at exactly the pace it requires. My beloved child, as this letter comes to its close, I want to leave you with one final truth to carry forward. You are still loved in the quiet. You were never loved less during this season of withdrawal than you were during your busiest, most visible, most constantly available seasons. My love for you has never depended on your output, your presence, your availability to others, or your ability to keep performing strength you did not actually have. My beloved child, I love you exactly as you are right now. Quiet, withdrawn, uncertain, resting, and I have loved you exactly this way every single day of this entire season. I want you to release, fully and completely, the apology you have been quietly rehearsing since this season began. You do not need to apologize for the unanswered messages, the declined invitations, the days you simply could not show up the way you used to. You do not need to apologize for protecting your peace, for withdrawing to rest, for choosing yourself in ways that felt unfamiliar after so long spent choosing everyone else first. My beloved child, this season was not a failure. It was necessary, and I was with you in every quiet moment of it, loving you exactly as fully as I always have. When you are ready, and only when you are ready, step back into the world at whatever pace feels true. Until then, rest, be quiet, be still. Let the silence do the work it needs to do in you without guilt, without apology, and without fear that I am anywhere other than exactly where I have always been, right beside you, loving you completely, in the noise and in the quiet alike. I will still be here tomorrow, and the day after, and every quiet day this season still requires, exactly as near to you as I am right now.